We probably buy over $10,000 worth of video games every single week, and we have seen tons of horror stories when it comes to shipping them, whether it's the box itself getting broken in shipping, or worse, the games inside getting broken. So if you guys want to learn the safest way possible to ship large amounts of video games, you're in the right place. And the first thing starts with the box that you choose. We've got a whole bunch of examples of boxes over here that people have used in the past. A lot of stuff like, old Amazon boxes getting reused. And we're all for reusing stuff, but you want to make sure that the box you choose is nice and thick and sturdy. So, for example, this, that might not be the greatest example. There are some good, like, this is a pretty nice, thick, sturdy box that somebody reused to send stuff to us in. If you don't have a lot of stuff like that, our favorite is the heavy-duty boxes from Home Depot. The more games that you're sending, if it's only a couple pounds worth of games, the thickness of the box is not a huge deal. But if you are sending stacks of games like this, it's going to matter a whole lot more. Ultimately, video games are very expensive, boxes relatively cheap. So start with a good heavy-duty box if you're concerned about stuff getting there in one piece. I would also recommend taping it at least multiple times. Packing tape, in our experience, is fine. We'll usually do at least 2 layers, usually one down the middle and one diagonally. If you're looking to be extra safe, you could go 3, 4, whatever. Again, tape is cheap, video games expensive. The first thing that you want to do is try to create a layer in the bottom and the sides and the top of the box between the precious games that you are sending and the wall of the box. Because if somebody puts a 100-pound behemoth on top of this guy, you don't want the first thing underneath the flaps to be your precious games, because that's how you end up with broken cases. So the first thing that I'll do is take something like a thick bubble wrap like this, or honestly, this definitely works the best. You could also use a few layers of the thin stuff. I wouldn't go necessarily with packing paper, because that's more likely to get crushed and not offer a lot of protection. And I'll just go ahead and fold this over however much I need to. You can get a shot into the box there to cover the whole bottom of the box. And then as we start putting things in, we will also layer in extra layers of this thicker bubble wrap material to protect it on all sides. Now the question is, once you have your box and you have your thicker material to protect it with all around and underneath, how do you pack the individual games inside? And my personal favorite method, at least when you're like, this is the maximum security method when you're really concerned about your games getting there in one piece and not getting chipped and stuff like that. I'll start with just a single game rather than a whole stack. A lot of people will start with a stack and they'll bubble wrap the stack. That's not a bad method, okay? That gets the job done. The thing that can happen, though, is if there is that pressure from the outside and they all get crushed together, sometimes you'll see multiple games at a time end up with chips in the cases. So the best way to avoid that is to have a single layer of bubble wrap between every single game. So I'll just do what I call the snake method. And it takes a little bit longer, but I'll fold a layer right over it like that, and then I'll put the next one on. And then fold another layer, and do this as tightly as possible. This is the negative of this method is it does use more bubble wrap than a lot of people really want to. The positive is, one thing that I've seen a lot of people doing is using a single strip of bubble wrap, a single square, for every single game and packing up games individually. This is much faster than that, and it uses less bubble wrap than that method. And you can just keep on going, layering game after game, until either you run out of space in your box or you run out of games. Whatever way you are doing it, we'll just go for one more in this stack here. And then I'll usually end by doing a single loop around so that everything is in there tightly packed together. Then we'll end it with one single little piece of Scotch tape. We are big fans of Scotch tape rather than packing tape for sealing these bundles up, because it's just way easier to take them apart afterwards and it gets the job done. Then we'll take this very protected bundle, in which you'll notice none of the games now are in contact with one another, but we also have been relatively cost effective in the bubble wrap that we've used. We'll put this on the already padded bottom of the box, and you can see now that not only do we have protection on bottom, on top, and everywhere in between, but the excess on the sides will also prevent it from taking a lot of damage laterally, especially once we get the extra stuff into the sides like this. Like that stuff, that's not going anywhere. Now, again, this is a little bit overkill, and if you have enough layers, you can wrap up a stack of 4, 5, 6 of these things. It really just depends on your risk tolerance, and again, how good of a job you've done packing all of the sides of the box will factor into that as well. But disc games are not the only kinds of things that you are likely to send in a large video game order. We don't personally take consoles, so we're not going over those in this video, but potentially in a future one. Another thing that people send us a ton is handhelds. I would never put these things together and bubble wrap them like that. I would always have a layer of bubble wrap between each one. I really like these little, they're basically poly mailers, but they're bubble bags. And they'll seal up. I would not put the charger inside with it, because then that's another thing that's likely to scratch around as it gets jostled in shipping. I would just put this thing, seal it up, and then take it over. And this can just get tucked in any nook that you want in the box, because it's got that layer of protection. And everything else in the box also has that layer of protection. So I'm not super worried about that thing getting damaged in shipping. The chargers, you can just kind of toss in anywhere. I wouldn't worry too much about making sure that those have a layer of protection around them. However, cartridges are another story. These things are also definitely prone to damage if you wrap them all up like this. We can use a very similar method to the snake method that I was talking about earlier, but we can actually put multiple of them in a single row. So I'll line up a couple Cruisin' USAs and then just fold it over on itself. And then I'll put a couple more on top and we'll fold it again. And this will give you a little bit more than necessary on the edges rather than if you're fully snaking it, but I don't care as much since these games are relatively thin. We'll do a final twist there, and then what I'll do with all of my Game Boy Advance games that I have here, because I also don't want them getting scratched up and damaged, and it's a little bit risky. We've oftentimes almost thrown away individual Game Boy Advance games that are wrapped up in bubble wrap, so it's nice to have them as a part of a larger package so they're a little bit more visible. And we can just do the same method with these guys. One more layer, and then, this is getting a little bit dicey here. Another layer. It gets the job done. We'll go ahead and tape that off, and again, none of these games are going to be in contact with one another. Now, in this example, since we do have some loose ones on the edge here and we don't want them falling off, I probably would go ahead and put a longer piece of tape on the edges here. And if you wanted, you could just take the Game Boy Advance games and put them in their own little strip of bubble wrap. It would probably only take a single square, which costs basically nothing. But we'll just make sure that we have no margin on the ends for these things to tumble out and potentially get lost. We'll take this little bundle over to our box. Oh, and that just fits so well right in there. We've got, again, padding on every side. But what happens at this point? Once you have multiple items, and of course you can repeat this process with all of the stacks of games that you have. Just make sure that, the box that you're using has enough space in the first place. But what happens when you have extra space in the box like this? Do you want to just tape it up and send it out like this? Definitely not. Because this, listen to this, even though every single item is padded, when you shake your box, you don't want to hear anything. That's like the ultimate litmus test for whether you have packed your box well. So we're going to open this thing back up. Because we've packed every individual game so well, I'm not really worried about them getting damaged when I shake it. That is the ultimate goal. But even after we have packed all the sides and packed all the bottom with our packing material, you also want to make sure that there is not a whole lot of just loose space, empty air in this box. So what I'll normally do for this is I'll grab one of our boxes of packing material over here. And I'll use something like this, like these air pouches, to fill the rest of the available space. We have no shortage of this around here. And what you want with this is for the packing material to put a little bit of pressure, just a little bit of pressure on the flaps when they're pushed down, but not a lot, right? So you want enough pressure to ensure that now, there's one thing, there's that DSI that's in there that needs a little bit more packing material, and you can see that's because it's got its own little corner here. So I want to make sure that I take a little bit extra for this, for example, and I put that in the little DSI corner so he is nice and snug. We'll take this as well just for safety. Put that in the DSI corner and then fill the rest of the space up as it was. We'll give it one final shake test. And you can see there's a little bit of pressure that's pushing up on these flaps, and that'll ensure that everything inside stays where it is and doesn't get jostled in shipping. And that's a beautiful thing, folks. We'll do the same thing on this top. We'll put multiple layers of tape to make sure that everything stays in place. And I have the utmost confidence that this is going to get to its destination in one piece.